see if I can go live here now. Is this going to work? Still having a few problems. Oh, there we go. I think I'm going. Yes. Okay. I think I'm live on Facebook now. Yes. Okay. So let me just start with, so basically, yeah, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit. So my primary jobs at the kind of King's Head are social media, kind of email marketing, reciprocal swaps, and kind of grassroots campaigns and free marketing, to reach out to community groups. And I do the programs for all of our shows as well. So any kind of questions you might have after I've gone through the questions that I'm going to answer, I'll be best suited to answering those questions. If there's any other questions that you might want answering, you can drop me an email. So that's Shadi, SHAADI, at kingsheadtheatre.com. And yeah, I'll pass that on and make sure that's answered for you. So a bit about me. So yeah, I've worked at the King's Head for 7 months now. And before that, I did a master's in writing for stage and broadcast media. So primarily my background before was, more as a writer, working in theatre. And I had worked in marketing a bit, but it was mainly from a kind of a retail perspective. And I think I wanted to kind of combine the two disciplines, but wasn't really sure how to do that. And I knew I wanted to work in a theatre office, and that I wanted to know what was kind of going on behind the scenes, and then started to kind of look for kind of entry-level positions for theatre offices. And then I kind of started to notice that a lot of the kind of core skills that I needed to be a marketing assistant in a theatre office I had. So I started applying to loads of places, and then I got the job at King's Head Theatre. And I've learned a great deal about how much work goes into kind of going to putting on shows. Okay. So that's good. So let me start with the first question that we've organised. So, how does a marketing department function in a theatre office, and how does it interact with other departments? So, as I said before, at the King's Head Theatre, in our marketing team, there's two of us. So there's me and there's Oscar, our marketing and program manager, and we interact with all the departments in the theatre. So essentially, as a marketing team, it's our kind of job to communicate, why, not just theatre as a whole, but our theatre exists, and, what we're doing and how to get involved in, in the wider world. And that kind of covers a lot of aspects of running a theatre in general, really. So in particular, we work really closely with the producing department. So on show campaigns, and working closely with cast and creative teams as well, because it's really good to kind of maybe get them involved in making some content. So we will get them to do kind of interviews with the cast or the writers or the directors, or we'll do on weekends, sometimes we do an Instagram kind of cast takeover, so that's really good to kind of get some of that content out there. And I think it's good because it kind of helps people to see what's going on behind the scenes. It kind of gets rid of the sort of like the mystery, like shroud of kind of what goes into a show. And I think people are really interested in seeing that. And obviously we work really closely with our box office department as they deal with ticketing sales. So that naturally informs what we do. And then our activities kind of inform what our box office team does as well. And the development department as well. So we kind of collaborate on public fundraising and communications. And then, so we kind of make sure that also that there's no crossover in content. So, there's no kind of oversaturation of, we might be emailing kind of two people, the same thing like every day, we don't want to make sure that's happening. Okay. So next question is, putting together a marketing campaign could be a daunting prospect. Where do you start? Start with the target audience, I would say, and kind of break that down into specific groups, and how we usually kind of see how best we can reach each group and what key message we should be sending. So, for example, some groups will respond better to social media or to kind of low price ticket offers. And then others will be will kind of respond more to print and maybe to the name of an actor or writer or a director if they're a big name involved. So then you'd know to kind of push that more. And then there's always it's good to have a strategy in terms of kind of audience development or kind of what technique you should use. So there's quite a few different ones. So I know there's SWOT, which is strengths, weaknesses, I can't remember what the other one is. And then so there's SWOT, but we use AIDA. So that's awareness, interest, desire, and action. So, and I think that's kind of good at distilling kind of the journey of a potential audience member might have before they book a ticket. So an example of what that might be. So awareness would be, a King's Head Theatre Google ad appearing for one of our opera shows. When someone is searching for a composer or a venue. And then interest would be then that person clicking through to the website and, reading about the show. Then the, thank you. So I just, opportunities and threats. Thank you. My mind went blank. Desire would be then realizing that the run ends in 2 weeks and the performances are selling out. So that's also a call to action. So then that's and then that would lead hopefully into the action, the last stage, which is then buying the ticket itself. And then different marketing campaigns will put a different emphasis on each step of that process. So depending on the show itself. So say if it's a new audience, it's a new writing, piece of new writing, and you're hoping to reach a new audience with that. Obviously, your emphasis would be on awareness, and it's about kind of spreading the word of that show to as many people as possible. And maybe for an example, one of our shows, the Christmas pantomimes we do with Charles Scott Opera. So that has a long-standing and a big dedicated audience. So then your focus would be on focusing on turning the desire into action part of that, but also kind of doing that at exactly the right time to make sure it's effective. And okay, so let's look at the next question. When you are conceptualizing and creating designs for print, where do you take your inspiration from? Is it just about what looks good, or are there other things to consider? I think we always take our inspiration from really just looking at what others are doing in the industry, also in film as well, film and theatre. We also work with graphic designers and on creators on the show as well, and even members of our staff team will contribute ideas. And that really kind of helps to kind of develop what we're going to use. I think ultimately it has to represent the show, its themes, its ideas, story, but it also has to represent the kind of target audience that you're hoping to reach. So maybe an example of that will be that a lot of genres have kind of pre-existing visual signifiers. So certain genres in their print will use a certain color scheme, or they'll use a certain image or kind of typography. And ideally what you'd want is that, a potential audience member will see a poster and at a glance will kind of instantly recognize the genre of the show, of what you're trying to sell. And in terms of typography, there's, on a poster, sometimes there's a lot of information that you need to kind of fit into one relatively small space, and knowing where to place that and what to emphasize is really important. So, for example, if you're doing a Shakespeare play, you would have the title, that would be, the emphasis would be on the title because of its notoriety. If it was a piece of new writing by, a relatively unknown writer, you would then emphasize maybe an award that they won, like, a new writing award, or it would maybe be a really good review the show might have got, and you would place the emphasis on that. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. So what is the key to good copywriting, and what are the big do's and don'ts? Ultimately, copy has to sell a show, and it has to be inspiring and exciting and, convince you basically to spend the money and buy a ticket. I would say the fewer words, the better. We should really be snappy. People don't want to be kind of bogged down with information, and it should really have as much information and essence of of a show in a few seconds, really. um and I would avoid lengthy plot descriptions, and you want to create a sense of intrigue, but you don't want it to be vague or for it to become too generic. um Emotive language, I think, is really key as well, and linguistic devices, such as the rule of three, alliteration, I think are really key as well. And yeah, I think the foreground of any copy is isolating what your key selling point is. So if the show has won or has been awarded a really prestigious award, or it's received like some really good reviews, or a big name is attached to the project, obviously that's going to be the foreground of your copy. Okay, next question. How do you go about identifying an audience for a show? So at the King's Head, we're actually really lucky that we have a lot of audience data to rely on. So a large portion of our audience are made up of people who've come to see a show at the King's Head before, and so then we're able to kind of use that in terms of kind of audience development. Yeah, because ultimately it's easier and it's less money to kind of retain a customer base than it is necessarily to find new ones. Which is why we have such an emphasis on kind of audience loyalty, and we cultivate those relationships, which our development department are really kind of focused on and maintaining those relationships. I think the first thing to identify is if someone, so our audience groups, if they've seen something similar to the show you're trying to push at the King's Head before, and then those are the people that you'd perhaps target with your new project. And then you would then break that down into booking frequency. So, have they booked, how many times have they booked over a year? And then we would look at if they're an active or a lapsed buyer. So if they have usually it's if they've booked in the last 2 years, or, if they haven't. And then we would then break those down and then adapt our approaches kind of accordingly to that. I would probably suggest, if you're not attached to a building and don't necessarily have access to that data, so I would say it's still really good to create an audience strategy, and to develop some audience retention, because if you're working on a campaign, you're starting from scratch, it's going to be really difficult to build that. And if you're looking to identify new audiences, I think obviously you're going to be the key things you're going to be looking at are kind of genre and form of a show, the creative team or cast involved, and then the topics and themes, and then looking at those and selecting the best angles that work best and have the largest potential in terms of audience development, from a sales point of view. Okay, next question. Are certain marketing techniques better suited to specific demographics? Can you give some examples? Yeah, definitely. I think you have to, with each kind of technique or each kind of thing you can use, you need to consider kind of where each demographic is kind of consuming content and what type of content it's consuming, and what will convince them to buy a ticket. So we can use an audience group, so we can use under 30s, for example. Instagram is a really good platform to use, because we know that out of all the social media platforms, it has the most under kind of 30s who are using it, and that they are going to be mobile friendly. Then we also know that under 30s are less likely to have disposable income, so therefore will be less loyal to a particular brand or to a particular venue, and are more likely to respond to offers. So we would then perhaps bring in an under 30s discount ticket scheme, or cheaper preview prices, and then highlight the savings that could be made. And then we also know that under 30s are less likely to book in advance. So the timing of when we would launch that as a campaign, it would be really important. Okay, next question. With social media, what do you need to keep in mind when creating content for each platform? As I said before, demographic is really key, and knowing which demographic uses each platform. But also you need to know what kind of type of content works on each platform, and then keep an eye out and monitor how people are interacting and using that content. So there are lots of useful articles and resources online to find out about that, and I think it's really worth keeping up to date with that, because obviously it changes regularly, and it's really worth keeping up to date with. But as a broad I guess it's like a broad kind of generalization. I guess Instagram image and video, like kind of focused content, works the best. It's something that's aesthetically pleasing, is gonna have the most engagement. Twitter is kind of news focused, so it's good for blog posts, press, so kind of cast or creative team interviews that they might do in the press, or kind of through reviews, announcements, and basically anything that people can engage with and can respond to is really, I think, is best suited for that platform. And creating a hashtag for a certain show or for an initiative is really important as well, to kind of allow for that conversation to continue. And then Facebook is good for curated content and for kind of these long form interactions. So I think it's really good for building a relationship over a long period of time. And again, like Instagram, I think video content works the best on Facebook in terms of if you want to use that to increase engagement across your platform. And worth bearing in mind that a lot of people who are kind of watching their social media content, they're on their phone, and most of the time it will be on silent. So it's really important to make sure all videos are captioned, so people are still kind of absorbing and engaging. Okay. Next question. Is there such a thing as doing too much on a campaign? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think the mark of a good marketing campaign is sending the right message to the right people at the right time. And then, as I said before about the AIDA kind of customer journey, and kind of really taking that into account. So yeah, I think you can definitely do too much, but and I think the thing I see the most that's the most common is just the same content being put out, over and over again. And I think that if that happens, I think people instantly will disengage with that. And a lot of the time, if you're struggling to convert that awareness into action, it's not because you're not doing enough, it's because you're targeting the wrong people or your timing is slightly off. So I think always resist the urge to do more and focus on maybe what you could do differently, or maybe different groups of people that you could potentially reach that maybe you haven't thought of yet. I think that's definitely the best tact. Okay, next question. How is arts marketing best placed to function at times like these? It's pretty difficult, because if there's no work, especially in arts marketing, if there's no work on, then there's nothing to promote. But as I hope you're seeing with KHT online, I think arts marketing at the moment still has a really powerful role to play in connecting, keeping artists connected and the industry as a whole connected, and kind of having a really positive focal point during, which is a really difficult time for everybody and for the industry especially. But it's also, I suppose, for us in particular, it's really good at it's still a good promotion tool, and it's still good at promoting companies and kind of artistic practice. Because at the moment there's obviously a huge captive audience online, and it's a really good opportunity to build a loyal following and actually even reach new audiences, so that when the shows we put on are back, then we're going to be able to reach a whole new audiences and larger audiences than we have before. I think it's an ultimate combination of building resilience for the future, and then and keeping everybody connected. So I think arts marketing is entering quite an exciting new phase at the moment. And okay, final question that I have here, and then I will answer some questions that have popped up. If I am looking to start a career in arts marketing, where should I start? I would probably do the same thing that kind of I did. So I looked at job descriptions for entry level, marketing positions, and kind of saw that I had some of the key skills. And even if you don't, I think it's worth looking at them and noting what are the key skills that an employer might be looking for, and then kind of trying your best to develop them and to get them. I know it's difficult at the moment because we're all stuck indoors, as you can see. So there are lots of online courses and web seminars and intros that you can do. It's the perfect time to do them because we're all stuck indoors, so you might as well. I think Audience Club is a really good example of they do some really good online courses. Yeah, and when we can be out and about again, just meeting up with people, picking their brain, people who work in arts marketing. But even now, like, what's the harm in emailing someone and asking them to have a coffee over Skype or Zoom? I think a lot of people would be willing to do that. Yeah, I certainly will, and yeah, I can imagine lots of others will be as well. Okay, so that's all the questions that me and Oscar had prepared. So I will see if there's any questions. Okay, we've got one from our artistic director, Adam Spreadbremer. Have you always wanted to work in theatre, arts, or marketing? Yeah, I touched on that a little bit at the beginning, but yeah, so before I started working at the King's Head, as I said, I did my master's in writing, stage, broadcast media. I've always really, I definitely knew I wanted to work in theatre. I just didn't know what that role wanted to be. And then I think, because I had those key skills, I guess, from working in marketing before, it seemed like a really logical step for me to take. And yeah, I think, well, hopefully they've paired together quite well. That's my journey to working in arts marketing. Got one from Layla, who's our lovely executive assistant. Would love to hear about the challenges of engaging new audiences while supporting your existing audience base. Yeah, that can be really difficult because it's difficult to, obviously, I mean, I speak for myself, but also I think a lot of people that you always, when you're kind of putting a show on, you always really want to reach, you really want to reach new people, but then it's always constantly that kind of that striking balance between, like isolating people who do already come to see shows, and then kind of bringing new audiences in. So that also affects obviously what you put on at a theatre as well, because obviously you want to like kind of tap into new audiences, but also cater to the people who already come to your venue. And yeah, it's been really interesting to know how you can do that. And I think a lot of the times it's, as I've spoken about, it's kind of what platform you use to promote. So ideally you can draw in loads of different audiences. So at the moment, as I said, like kind of our younger audiences are really, social media is a really kind of good place to develop these new audiences, and we're constantly looking at creating new content and engaging content that will hopefully bring in some younger and more diverse audiences. But it is a real struggle. It's really difficult. Got one here from Jonah. I've been watching KHT online content for a few days now. What should initiatives like this be looking to put across in the current difficult moment we all face? I think that's, so our executive director and artistic director, so Fiona English and Adam Spreadbremer, I think they're thinking behind creating KHT online was the fact that, although the theatre may be dark at the moment, but we still wanted to be very active and still be here, and to be able to engage and kind of connect people in the industry as much as possible, because obviously it's a difficult time for anyone in terms of feeling isolated and alone, and just being generally a bit kind of scared about what the kind of future holds, really, but especially in the kind of theatre industry, because it's hard hit everybody so much. And I think it's so what we've been trying to do, obviously, is to get kind of people from all kind of disciplines in the industry to come and speak, and to reach people and to answer questions, so everybody feels that they're still engaged and they're all connected and you're still working towards something. And it, as I said, in terms of audience development, I think it's still going to be really, really profitable for the King's Head in terms of moving forward with new shows. So I think that's what we're trying to do, and achieving, hopefully. I've got one from Matt, who's one of our lovely TRDs. Hi Shadi, would you say posters and flyers are at a disadvantage if they don't use imagery specifically shot for the purpose, or can abstract design archive images be just as strong? It's difficult. I think it depends on the show and your audience as well. But I know Obviously, yeah, as I'm still training, but obviously I know for a fact, I know Oscar is definitely against kind of like drawings or kind of animation, these kind of things on posters. Um, because yeah, I think it ultimately doesn't look good, and I don't think it sells as well. But obviously, it really does depend on a show. Um, I think that a good example to look at is actually our 2020 spring announcement that we did. I think the artwork that we did for that was really lovely and really effective, and it's kind of just isolating kind of like a one image, but it really kind of represents the show. So I think the poster for Iolanthe in particular was really strong. It's a really beautiful image of like a fairy and the color scheme, and it really just like worked well, and it kind of tells you all you need to know about the show, but it's done in a really kind of simple and clear cut way, and just tells you, yeah, gives you all the information you need, basically. I'll see if I've got any questions on Instagram. There we go. I've got one from Parisa. How does your creative linguistic background influence on the creative aspect of marketing? That's a really good question. Yeah, I think yeah, it really does. It really does help. I think in terms of developing a brand, voice and brand development, I think it's really important because obviously when you're writing, your your aim obviously of a character is to give them a really kind of individual and like kind of stand out, like a voice of a character is to like develop that really in depth. And and then I guess when you're marketing, you're kind of doing the same thing but for a venue. So it's ultimately asking the question, obviously, is this why is this theatre telling this story now? Like, why are we telling this story? And I think obviously at the King's Head, that's something that's really helpful when it comes to developing obviously campaigns and what we're saying, because obviously saying like, why are we putting the show on, and what are we saying, what are we saying about yeah, about the theatre, and what are we trying to comment on? So yeah, it really does come in handy, I think. Yeah, it's a really good question. See if I missed any. um I've got one from Rhiannon. What is the most rewarding show you have worked on at the King's Head? um what is the most rewarding show I've worked on? I think like, yeah, would say when I first because I started last August, um, and I think one of the shows that I'd worked on from the start, so that kind of hadn't already had the campaign leading up to it, was the Elixir of Love, um, which was the opera we did last in autumn last year, and so I kind of was at the start of when I joined when that campaign was just starting, and then that was the first one I was able to see the rewards of like what I was learning, what was being put into place, and being able to see how that kind of like developed, and challenges that maybe came up, and then how those learning how to kind of to resolve those. And it was a really good learning experience, and I think it was after that show closed that I'd realized the full kind of journey of yeah, how to work on a marketing campaign. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's 1:30, so I'm gonna wrap up now. But yeah, I hope that was informative, and I hope I answered as many questions as I could in when I went through our question and answers. But yeah, as I said, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. That's shardy@kingsheadtheatre.com, and I can answer the question, or I can pass it on to someone else who might be able to answer it for you. Yeah, and so KHT Online is every weekday from 1 to 1:30. And tomorrow is our Ask Us Anything. So make sure you tune in for that. And yeah, thank you. And yeah, bye bye.